Hello.
Welcome
to FTI Takeover. I'm your host, Alex Smith.
And I'm Karen Ryan, your other host.
And we are so excited to see you again today for another episode of FTI Takeover. We're always working on that. Yeah, it's always like a little bit different every time. It's not
Always
that great.
working on our jingle. We're going to take a little time here to reintroduce ourselves to you guys. So, Alex, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay, sounds good. So I am Alex. I am super excited to see you all again. It has been such a journey since we have launched this podcast. So for those who don't know me, as you already mentioned, my name, I am originally from South Florida. I grew up in Deerfield Beach. Big shout out. There's not a whole lot of us out here podcasting about mental health. So I'm super excited to rep my hometown. I work in technology. I work in sales as a sales leader. I'm an entrepreneur. I am super excited about a lot of the work that I do around yoga, breath work, meditation. I'm currently working for a mental health technology organization. And I recently started this podcast with Karen. I think, are we really only at like 1 month in? Isn't that so wild?
It's only been 30 days. 30 days.
People are like, how long have you been doing this? It's like, it feels like forever.
Like our whole life.
We literally just started.
Yeah.
It's so awesome. We've learned so much. But anyways, so we are here to provide a platform for mental health support and resources. We are mental health advocates.
Yes.
We are not obviously licensed clinical therapists. Like, don't hit us up for an hourly session. Definitely drop your notes in the comments, but we're here to give access to the different resources and the different experiences that we've had. And, you know, I'm just excited. Karen, you tell you.
Oh my gosh. I love you, Alex. You're amazing. So literally, I would just want to just take it back a notch. Almost a year ago, Alex and I met. We were both at a Halloween party. Alex was a mermaid and I was Wonder Woman. And we were at this crazy Halloween party and she approached me and said, "Are you normal?" And I said, "I'm a little normal with a little crazy." I said, "One day we're going to do business together." And little did I know what God's plan was with this podcast. We are literally here on a platform to access you to mental health resources. We have all the resources. No, we're not clinical therapists with any kind of PhDs, but we do speak from the heart and from experience, both being through a lot. I personally am a serial entrepreneur. I refuse to work for anybody. It's my way of doing things. I have massive ADD, but that's what takes my attention into so many different directions with my creativeness. So I also am a yoga meditation instructor. I just recently got certified in quantum healing regression meditation.
Yes, level 1.
Level 1, we got that together.
Just did that. Shout out to Roberta DeCastro, who is a master teacher in teaching quantum healing regression. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we will. But super shout out to Alex for inviting me to that retreat that brought me to the next level of healing within my own soul. So today we're going to be talking about a wonderful subject called codependency. It's very important that we...
Wonderful?
It's wonderful. We're bringing this. We're talking about the things that are going to make you guys itch and scratch. Like you're gonna be like, "Oh my God, it's so uncomfortable. Like I don't want to talk about it." But we're going to bring the value to you. Both of our backgrounds have a lot to do with mental health from just experience in life. And you know, in my profession, I also am in the health and wellness industry. And the one company that I'm with right now just merged with the #1 mental health nutraceutical company in the world, which I'm super excited about because on a level of, how can I say, brain health, it's going to bring people to more education and to look for other resources rather than chemical drugs. And that's something I could talk about another time, but nutraceuticals versus pharmaceuticals. And my real passion in life is just having your health. If you have health, you have nothing. You can have all the money you want in the world, but people worry about 2 things, health and wealth, and I got them both solved for you. So we're going to start today just by opening this conversation with codependency. I'm going to take a deep breath on that.
Hold on, let's breathe together for a second. Just do a 1 inhale and exhale. Another deep breath. Breathe in and let it out. Which reminds me, It's probably the first time I remembered to breathe today. We have so many issues with remembering how to breathe, and the breath is so essential. But it's important for us to also start our podcast with this, because this is a podcast for people who would like to grow. We talk about very real topics. You might not be talking about these things with your friends. You might not even be having the conversation with yourself right now, but we are here to raise it up because it is one of the most important things that you can do for yourself as you heal from your own journey and improve your relationships with technology, your relationships with your partners, your relationships with work. These are how we get through this crazy, wild ass life. So I'm so excited to talk about this topic. When Karen first approached me she goes, Alex, I really want to talk about codependency. And I was like, I know about codependency, but like, what is it actually?
Yeah.
I feel like a slight rain cloud come over my head when I think about codependency because it doesn't feel like that's a really good term. But what is your understanding of codependency?
So for you, it's a rain cloud. For me, it's an actual hurricane, a tremendous storm in my life, codependency. I take it back to my childhood, just being very learning what codependency was. And it was ingrained within my DNA to have validation from another person, to have to account my every action for somebody, for having to walk on eggshells. And as I did my research on this, speaking of codependency, it was really eye-opening for me. That feeling of eggshells, that nervousness, am I feeling that, am I doing the right thing? Like, I need to be accountable. I have to tell you what I'm doing. Just thinking I needed somebody else. And it took all the experiences through my life to thus far for myself to understand that really it's an independency versus the codependency. I look back at raising my 4 children, and there was a point where I actually can say out loud that I was running late all the time. And I can't blame it on anything, but just the way that I am is like running late and carrying that lateness into their anxiety and like building this anxiety. Is mom going to show up? Is she going to be here on time? Like, what's going to happen? And I've noticed that through my friendships and through relationships. But I was raised like that, like always running, being on eggshells, never enough time, trying to do too much to distract everything around me. The codependency is a heavy subject, but I can actually say that I've learned a lot through my relationships in that. And I see signs of it now that I could logically talk to somebody on a psychological level of how that's affecting them in their life.
Yes. It says that the definition by the American Psychological Association says that the definition of codependency is the state of being mutually reliant. And it's about a dysfunctional relationship pattern in which an individual is psychologically dependent or even controlled by a person who has a pathological condition. So alcohol, gambling, or a specific issue, which I think this is something that we've probably all been in at some point or another, whether we are conscious about it or unconscious about it. Because obviously growing up as a child, we learn how to be codependent on our parents.
Right.
When we're children, we need them, obviously, for food, shelter, water, warmth, emotional support, all of that. And so they say that it doesn't necessarily have to exist from when you are in childhood or however that's formed. They said that there's 3 different areas in which codependency can be exposed, which is through biological, psychological, and social environments, which I think is really interesting. So it can either exist or it can be developed.
And that's where this is going to come into a wonderful conversation. For me, I believe it always exists if you were raised with it. If you saw codependency of your parents and you saw use the word destruction of watching one parent versus the other being so accountable and like seeing another parent in an addiction. It could be a drinking addiction, a drug addiction, sexual addiction, gambling, whatever that addiction is. That addiction then makes the other person wanting to help them. And sometimes it happens unconsciously. Like you see somebody who's struggling, right? They have a drug addiction, alcohol, gambling. You're like in this relationship of trying to help them, but you're existing to help them exist when really they have to do the work on themselves, right?
Yes.
And that's not going to happen because that person is so stuck in that cyclical cycle of returning and let's get a hamster just back and forth of running after themselves. And you know what, Alex? It's really important that everyone understands this, that when you're stuck in a cycle, you know it. And you know you can take that drink or take those drugs or do that gambling or do whatever you're going to do. And it just surfaces the problems. But actually going through help and therapy and working on yourself and working out and eating well and fueling your body with what it needs, a whole different aspect of doing that, that will break away the codependency. And I have to say, I know a lot of people that are extremely codependent to this day. And my recognizing it with them, I'm just stepping back. If they need me, they know I'm there. But I cannot have this in my life anymore. I finally broke the cycle for myself, which took years of recovery.
The way that I think about codependency is when I think about a very toxic relationship that I was in at one point in my experiences. And I obviously didn't know how toxic I was in the situation, but I was literally walking on eggshells. I was checking in all the time. I felt like if I didn't give the details of where we were and what we were doing, that I was a shitty partner, which is extremely unhealthy, which is why they say the codependency obviously has levels. And once it gets to a certain level, it can become very abusive, right? These things end up taking control. And that's what they say codependency is very much rooted in, is in control over a situation. And that other person feels as though they can't do, they can't be without the permission. And there's so many different things that are involved in that, between gender dynamics, cultural differences, obviously, women being the oppressed for a very long time, men being the oppressor historically in a lot of different religions and a lot of different races and a lot of different places around the world still. These things are like so embedded in us. And it's just interesting to learn. Now that I'm not in that toxic relationship anymore, I remember that feeling of just feeling like everything that I could do on my own that I maybe wanted to do for myself, which was like obviously not cheating or being disloyal or being shitty or being any sort of not a good person, was a way for me to possibly get in trouble, right? So I was so worried all the time. And I realized I was codependent. I was on the other side of the country by myself in this relationship with this person. None of my family around. At that point, I had no friends anymore. Just dating this one person, and he ruled my life for those last 6 months. Was when it got really bad.
There's a power play there, because people that have, they seek, and I'm going to say this, and I'm saying this to y'all. When you cry, some people see it as a sign of weakness. When you cry, you're actually releasing these toxins and this dysfunction within your body, right? You're releasing it on a physical form for your emotional and mental health. However, as you're speaking about this relationship, I can go through a few relationships too that I've been through, but there's a power play there. They see the kindness in you. They see the goodness in you, and they see, to them, a slight weakness where they know they can draw it out of you. They feed off you. It's feeding off your energy. And they're taking this in for themselves to build themselves up. The scary part about that is that it comes into this very psychological, I almost want to say like a psycho kind of way of thinking, that you can control this other person, or this power of this person, or you're so great. I love the fact that you brought up the cheating, because cheating and lying in any kind of relationship, whether it is between partners or business or friends, is never good. When you're cheating on yourself. So we all need to be like firm about that. If you're cheating, you're lying to yourself. The sociological part of it is that we as humans look at what people think about us. And I always live by this quote: other people's opinions are their opinions, but they're not the mirror image that I see of myself. So sociological, like, so many friends had told me during these toxic relationships, Karen, get out. Karen, what are you doing? Karen, this. Karen. I didn't see it because I was so stuck in it, because I wasn't willing to work on myself. So once you take that accountability for yourself, the responsibility of reaching out and getting help for you, then we break away.
That's very brave of you to be honest about your awareness in the situation, of knowing that you had multiple people trying to help you at the time, but you couldn't see it for yourself. So you had to really step away from the situation and create space for you to see it from a different view. And sometimes distance will really help us with that. But a lot of us, even sometimes don't have that grace. There's so many people that are living in dysfunctional, abusive relationships. And abuse comes in a lot of different forms, whether it's verbal, whether it's physical, psychological, emotional, everything. So it's very hard to tell when you're in a codependent situation. But I have a couple people in mind just because they're in my life right now that I care for deeply, that I see personally as friends that are in these incredibly toxic relationships to the point where, they've broken up every other weekend. Every other time I talk, it's like, are you together? Are you not? Is it this? And that is codependency. Like, why can you not walk away from that situation? There's something about you that feels a little bit addicted to the drama or addicted to the fucked up situation. And it's hard for us to admit that we would put ourselves through that. But the reality is a lot of that is being pre-programmed through biological prefrontal cortex of, developing something very early on that finds familiarity with that. Mm-hmm. And then also social environments, right? So if you're hanging out at the bar and that other person's hanging out at the bar, well, cool. You'll do your drama and do all that bullshit at the bar too.
Absolutely. I'm going to say this boldly that I was in a relationship with somebody who was in a relationship. So I was with somebody that had another person in their life. And the hard part about that is when you're codependent, you assume that the other person has these like needs that you're filling, but they're not really filling the needs for themselves, right? That the person that they're really with might be filling their needs, but they're not. You have to dissect yourself from that. And there's a lot of that exists. And I really like that you had talked about cheating because we cheat on ourselves. Okay. It's not so much a situation you're in a relationship and you're cheating or somebody else is cheating. We cheat ourselves out of our value, our worth, our time. And having be with people in a toxic relationship and you see this and you're aware of it, it's like you can talk till the cows come home, but they're not going to listen to you. It just isn't going to happen. So one person assumes responsibility of the other one, but then they exclude themselves out of that situation. It's not healthy.
Well, what happens is when you're in a codependent relationship, you have lost your sense of self. And when you lose your sense of self, it's very hard for you to see clearly. It's hard for you to see directly what kind of situation you're actually in. So all you know is how you feel, which is I feel familiar. I feel, even though this isn't a good situation, I feel at home with this person. And that is turbocharging a lot of the unhealthy, toxic habits that end up being supported within the relationship. And that's how addiction is created mutually exclusive when you're with somebody. I mean, I know for a fact that I come from a parent who has suffered from drugs and alcohol. And I have also dated partners that have issues with drugs and alcohol. I personally don't want anything to do with either of those things, but I find these people in my life, and then when they are in my life, and I've dated these guys before where it's like I date that one person and I drink more than I've ever drank in the last 20 years. It's not healthy. So I think awareness is obviously the first step in understanding the biological engravements that are a part of how you respond to people or what you're attracted to. But then it's like, how do you unwind codependency?
I love everything that you said. Coming from yourself, a parent of alcoholism and drugs, I come from a parent massively alcoholic. And great question. How do you break away from that? You as a child lived through that. You felt the pain, but you still had another parent that was there to, put their arms around you and show you the way.
But a lot of people don't.
A lot of people don't have that.
That is a total privilege that I have.
You just gave me chills because in my personal situation, my father was an alcoholic. My mom was always trying to pull my brother and I out of the situation and find us somewhere safe and whatever. And I went through a very tremendous amount of trauma as a child, but grateful that my mom was bringing us through that. I knew I didn't want that for my children. Okay. Same thing.
And you have 4 children.
I have 4.
You have to tell people what your beautiful 4 children are.
I have beautiful 4 children. I've got the crazy hands. I've got my 3 daughters.
Italian.
My 3 daughters and my son, Fallon, Danielle, Miranda, and Michael, the loves of my life. I was very blessed to have 4 children. And talk about this really quick. I come from a very alcoholic, abusive, emotional, mental, and physical background. I was abused in all those aspects. And I remember being 18 years old and sitting outside and just saying to God, I just want to have a family. I just want to be happy. And 3 years later, I was graced with my daughter, Fallon, and then Danielle and Miranda and Michael. So for me as a mom, I knew what I wanted for my children. I didn't want them to be in that cyclical cycle of abuse. And that was happening throughout my marriage and through friends around us. And the only way I could get out of that was by dissecting myself. And that goes back to your question, how does a person do it? You have to make a conscious choice. I'm not going to live the way that I lived. There is hope and there's a better way of living, and I'm going to find it. You can never give up on yourself. There's consistency. There's being repetitive with your habits, creating healthy habits, and knowing that you can do it. And through all of that, you just break away. By myself doing that, my children were able to get on with a healthier life, and they're just thriving now. But the fact of it is I didn't want that. But for me, a lot of guilt as a parent, Alex, a lot of guilt that I came from a household like that and entered into the law of attraction, the codependency, the addictiveness, the fixing, the wanting, the helping, to one day, all I want is my freedom and my peace.
Guilty or not guilty, you need to draw the line in the sand. You have to get to a point where you realize that this person is not helping me, serving me emotionally, physically, spiritually, any of those areas. And you have to make a choice, like you said, to walk away from the situation. I'm going to choose not to go to these places anymore because I don't want to run into this person. I'm going to choose not to respond to their texts. I'm going to block them. I am a huge believer that you must block people that you don't want in your life because they are unhealthy, they are toxic, they bring drama, they bring negativity. They've brought so much hurt to you in all of the different areas that we've been discussing. Pull out your phone and block them. Block them on social media and block them on your phone, because having them reach out, it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be very a moment of weakness for you when they are. So you have to do these hard things. But it's doing these hard things that you're able to reap the benefits. And that's just the way that it is.
You have to. You actually block people. I know I was laughing at this, but on email too. I've had certain people that I've blocked in my life that still come up with these brand new emails.
I find you on LinkedIn. I had someone find me on Venmo once, and then it was like, hey, I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Like, I had somebody reach out, desperately seeking Karen@gmail.com. You are on the desperate side. Little border there, you're not going to come in. But I love what you said about that. Just, you have to do that for yourself. And people are going to seep in and they're going to sneak into your life because they know that they're wrong. But
take courage.
But their addictiveness is they're addicted to you. They want you. They're going to come after you, and they're going to seek out that person that they knew at that time. But through personal development, you're a new person now. You're not doing it.
And then the codependency part is also a little bit like, ooh, I'm going to just block them on the phone. So then they're going to reach out to me on Instagram because they're going to see my post. Like, that's codependency. So you're fueling that same fire. Yeah. So you can't just fake that shit and be like, I'm going to block them. Like, it needs to be intentional, just like everything else.
You have to fucking do it and cut the cord. Cut the cord, savage, just we're done.
Yeah.
So that's our thing. If you're in a codependent relationship and you're having a hard time getting out of it, seriously, reach out to us. We have resources for you. We have to break that cyclical cycle of repeating the same thing over and over again.
Yes, because it's not healthy when you struggle to find time for yourself. It's not healthy if you feel like you're walking on eggshells all the time. It's not healthy if you feel like you don't know who you are anymore.
But it's okay to walk away, right, Alex? I mean, like, you want your peace of mind. And you said earlier, grace, giving yourself grace and permission. You're giving yourself permission. You're giving yourself the...
If you were in an abusive relationship, it's a little bit different because it's not as easy. And there is a lot more steps involved sometimes to make that happen.
We both survived abusive relationships. Why? The first thing that comes to my mind is there's something better. I've got to get out of this. This isn't good for me.
Right.
Okay, and it was scary and it was hard, and I walked away from a lot of things that some people would look at, but I walked away to my sanity, I walked away to my peace and my health. For myself, that's what's important for me.
I think that we had a very, impactful, short, packed to the punch message for today, which I think is really important for people. And we mentioned that one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast and surfacing these different topics is because mental health is a huge epidemic that's happening right now all over the world. And especially within the last couple of years, all of this has all come to the forefront. What do these terms actually mean? How do I identify the situation that I'm in and then get myself out of it? Where are the access to resources and education around this topic? One of the things that I think that is such a hardship about where we are, especially here in the US healthcare, is that so many people need mental health but cannot afford mental health. therapy sessions, whether you have insurance or not, if you want anybody good and you don't want to wait for 6 to 8 weeks to get care, is somewhere around $150 to $200 an hour. A lot of people can afford that. So what we're at least trying to do is share our resources of what we've been able to learn, provide this podcast to people for free, so that way they have access to understanding. We're going to continue to have guests on here that are licensed clinical therapists, healers, coaches, all of these different people that we can provide access to all of you for.
Absolutely. Alex, that's so beautifully said. I just love you so much.
I love you too.
And your heart is just so huge. And, everything that we're bringing here to you is value from our hearts. This is definitely our mental health. I know I finally have control of my mental health and making my own decisions and what's good for me, and as well as Alex does for herself. But through our experiences and the people we know, we just want to share that with you because we all need it. We've been through a lot. This is a crazy world out there, and you're not ever alone.
Never. You are never alone,
never
especially
alone.
Not with us here.
No,
so
we have your back. We
yes,
love you.
Thank you so much for supporting us. Follow us, like it, subscribe, and
share it.
Yes, share with your
share
friends.
with
Educate. Let's share the love, share the wealth, share the health, and we can't wait to see you again. So peace and love. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye.